guys, welcome back to Plow and Pantry. I'm Alicia, and today we're talking flour, einkorn flour, and my 3 favorite einkorn recipes. It's a dreary day. I feel like making bread, and so I thought it'd be a great time to share with you my favorite things to make with einkorn flour. If you are not familiar with einkorn flour, let me give you a really quick primer. I have here a regular all-purpose flour, and these are both einkorn flour. Now, einkorn it's a wheat flour just like this, but it's the ancient grain, what we used to eat for wheat flour before we hybridized it all. And some scientists think that the modern hybridization of the wheat to make it shorter, faster, full of more seed heads, all that stuff, is the reason that a lot of people are more gluten intolerant now. So einkorn, I am a little bit gluten intolerant myself. I'm not celiac. I want to put this out there. If you are celiac, you cannot have einkorn flour. I have a friend who was newly diagnosed with celiac, and someone told her, oh, if you can't have regular flour, you can have sourdough. Not true. If you are gluten intolerant, you might be able to have sourdough, but if you are celiac, you are allergic to that protein, I believe. Einkorn is also wheat. You can't have that either. But if you just have an intolerance, you might want to try it. I do not have any of the issues when I use einkorn flour that I do with all-purpose or regular flour nowadays. I don't do sourdough because I don't like it. I do know how to make it. I grew up making it with my mom. She shared her starter and made it all the time, and I helped her with that, but I don't like it. I've never liked it. But I have been experimenting with swapping things out in my regular recipes with einkorn flour. The reason I have 2 here, this one is whole wheat einkorn flour. I get this from Azure Standard. It's called their Unifine. I do that because it's cheaper. It's significantly cheaper through them than getting their Unifine. That is the equivalent of any other brand's einkorn whole wheat flour. Jovial is a very common brand. I can link both Azure and Jovial stuff below if you want to find flour. Some local grocery stores will carry einkorn flour. Mine does not. There is one store 3 towns away that does carry it. They carry just the all-purpose, which is what this one is. So sometimes if I'm really hard up, I will jet out there and grab some, but I also order this from Azure. Azure's brand only makes the Unifine, which is equivalent to the whole wheat. So this one is the Jovial brand, but I still get it from Azure. It's still cheaper than buying it at the grocery store or Whole Foods or Earth Fare for me. So that's what these 2 are, a whole wheat version of einkorn and an all-purpose version of einkorn. I'm going to be using both of these for my recipes today. And so I think I covered everything you might want to know about einkorn, at least to get started. So let's get over to the mixer and start on some biscuits, because that is one of my first things I successfully swapped over to einkorn. I took my mom's biscuit recipe, which is our family's favorite, and made it einkorn friendly. You do have to make some small changes when you use einkorn, mostly with the liquid level to flour ratio. It just absorbs liquid differently. But I have tested all these, and they are family favorite recipes now, after I've messed with them for months and months. So you can benefit from my experimental times. I'm going to start with biscuits with the whole wheat einkorn flour. Let's go over to the mixer. Okay, I am armed with my mom's biscuit recipe that I grew up with, and I'm going to do this in my mixer. If you use a stand mixer, you want to make sure that you are only using it a little bit and not any quick bread. You don't want to overmix your dough or batter. And so just be careful. I make everything in it. I'm just real careful to not mix it a ton. Makes things tough. All right, we're going to start with 2 cups of the whole wheat einkorn flour. I always fluff up my flour before I use it, just to make sure I'm not getting things too dense. And then I have to, a tablespoon of baking powder. I have baking powder from Azure Standard. I like that it is easy to get, the kind that does not have aluminum, and it's just as cheap as regular baking soda or baking powder in a store. Okay, 1/2 teaspoon salt. Using sea salt, use whatever you have. 3/4 cup of milk. And then 1/3 cup of butter. You can use oil if you want. This is melted. You can use oil if you like. I just like the taste of butter. Just a preference. Do what you want. And then I'm going to mix this just until it comes together. I don't want to overmix it. especially since I'm going to be patting it out on the counter when I cut it. Okay, I have my oven preheating to 450. A little bit of avocado oil here in the pie dish is what I like to put my biscuits in. You can use melted butter for this part instead of the oil, but I feel like sometimes the butter in this section will make it get a little bit soggy. Okay, let's bring my batter here, dough, and this is a newly cleaned counter. I'm going to spread out some extra of the flour here. And then scoop my biscuit dough onto here. Whenever I do something like this with dough or anything else similar, I like to get it filled up right away with soapy water. It makes it a lot easier to clean. And since I'm going to be using that mixer for all 3 recipes, I'm going to have to clean it in between. All right, so when I'm making the biscuit thing here, the dough, I'm patting it out. I'm not really, you can roll it out. I'm just being kind of gentle. You don't want to overwork it. I'm going to reach in here and get my biscuit cutter. Let's see, what size do I want today? Let's go with this one. And biscuits, you do not want to twist when you are cutting them. You want to, if you twist it, you seal the edges, which keeps them from rising. So you just want to go straight up and down if you can. And what I do in these is I kind of swirl it, flip it over. Swirl it in the oil, flip it over. That way you've got both sides. Okay. And then I'm going to take the scraps here and pat it back out into another round so I can cut more biscuits. This is about 3/4 of an inch thick is about how I'm going. It looks like I can get one more out of this. I don't know if I can fit one more in my thing though. Let's see. Flip it, get it all greased up and flipped. And then I will scooch some things around. There we go. All right, I'll get rid of this. Wash my hands. I'm gonna get this into my oven. It's still preheating, but it'll be good enough. 20 to 30 minutes on this. I always start on the earlier side. And then I'm gonna get my mixer cleaned up and get ready to make some cookies. Let's get going on this cookie batter here. Oatmeal chocolate chip is my favorite kind of cookie. So it was, of course, the first dessert that I started trying to do with einkorn flour. And it took probably the longest for me to figure out too. Partly because one of the keys to working with einkorn flour is to restrict the amount of liquid. And cookies don't really have liquid. They have butter instead. And that is a little bit harder to guesstimate as far how much you need. All right, so I put in a cup of softened butter, and I'm going to put in a 1/2 cup each of regular granulated sugar and brown sugar. Now, that's actually not very much. I tend to play this game with myself for sweet things. How little sugar can I use and still make it good? So a cup of sugar is actually not very much for cookies. This is packed. I just smashed it against the side to get it packed. I do typically use 1/2 and 1/2 granulated and brown sugar in this type of cookie. I just like the texture that gives. It's like a combination of sweet and chewy is just right to me. So I have the 1/2 and 1/2 with that. And I'm going to cream. I need to get my whisk attachment. I'm going to cream the butters and sugars together. Okay. And you could do this with a hand mixer or even by hand with a whisk if you really want to. And what we're looking for here is it's called creaming. is actually to look like a sugary cream. Kind of like it's all one substance, just like that. Okay. I'm going to get my spatula. It is almost there, but you can see if you look closely a couple small chunks of butter that have not yet been completely incorporated. So I'm just going to spoon this stuff out, push it out so it can mix, and do one more quick blitz. Okay, and that looks pretty good. All right, time to add the rest of the ingredients. At this point, I am going to put in 2 eggs here and get my chicken tub here. I do give my chickens their eggshells back, and I know some people will like cook them or sterilize them and crush them. I don't do that, and I've not really had a problem with it. The calcium from the eggshells is really good for the chickens, and it's not. I don't feel like the step of sterilizing them is necessary unless you're wanting to have a certain amount that you try to feed them every day and you need it to last. I just feed them the shells as I use them, and I just kind of crush them with my fingers a little bit so it doesn't look like an egg because I don't want them pecking eggs. Okay, I am going to get these 2 eggs incorporated. And start putting in the other ingredients. All right. So for this one, I'm going to use vanilla, about 2 teaspoons. When I cut out sugar, I usually up the vanilla because it'll give it a hint more of sweetness. You don't want to go overboard because then it'll just taste weird, but it will kind of add a little more sweetness without adding sugar. And then for the flour, I'm going to use both the whole wheat and the all-purpose today. I'm going to use 3/4 cup of each because I prefer to use the as much of the whole wheat as I can, but the texture was just not completely all right when I used all whole wheat. So I'm doing half and half, but 1.5 cups of either all-purpose einkorn flour or 3/4 cup of each, which is what I'm doing today. This is a half cup measure, so for the extra quarter, I'm kind of just eyeballing the half of a half thing. It's good enough. As for spices, I'm going to do a teaspoon of salt. We have a half teaspoon here. So 2 of those. And baking soda. Half teaspoon each of baking soda. And baking powder. By the way, the recipes for the biscuits and these cookies will be on my blog. I'll leave links below. The sandwich bread recipe I'm going to make you is I got from a different site, and I will link that website below as well. Okay, so at this point, I like to add a pinch of nutmeg. Just a pinch. And then I'm going to get this all mixed in. Oh, wait, I forgot the oats. Hello there, oatmeal chocolate chip. We're going to do 2.5 cups of oats. These are rolled oats. You can use quick oats. This is a 1/2 cup measure that I just leave in here. I got these really old measuring things out of Habitat for Humanity years and years ago, and I just leave the ones I have. They weren't a complete set, and I leave the ones I have in my things that I measure all the time. Okay, oats are in. Now we can finish mixing this up. Okay, I'm going to add chocolate chips now. Y'all, I'm doing a pantry challenge, and this might be the last of my chocolate chips. And I don't measure chocolate chips. I kind of just eyeball it. Get some stuff off the sides here. That looks pretty good for the chocolate chips. That was probably like 1.5 cups. ish. Did you just hear my dog come running? He heard the chocolate chip bag and he recognizes that sound. He also recognizes the sound of me unwrapping a stick of butter. He likes butter. All right, let's get a cookie sheet to get this onto. Okay, I like to use the large cookie scoop for this, and I have my pan lined with a silicone thing. You can use parchment paper or just spray the pan if you want. It's up to you. This will make about 18-ish fairly large cookies. And I just scoop it up the side so it's a nice round ball. Okay, time to get these biscuits out of the oven. And there we have some perfectly delicious einkorn biscuits, nice and hot, ready for either jelly or biscuits and gravy. One of my family's favorites. Okay, I like to kind of pat these down just a little bit. And I let them sit for 8 to 10 minutes and kind of just absorb some liquid so that the oats aren't too hot and crunchy, hard and crunchy. And before I get them in the oven is now set for 350 and they'll take about 10 minutes. Let's pull one of these out and get a nice taste. Now these look dark, like they would be heavy, but they're not. They're light and fluffy. Look at that steam. Oh my gosh. I think what I want on this today is some pomegranate jelly. I made that. I'm pretty sure I made that on a video. I will link it for you in an iCard. Learning einkorn was so worth it because I had gotten to a point where I couldn't eat stuff like this anymore. And honestly, I feel like once you master it, the whole wheat stuff with einkorn is way better than whole wheat with regular flour. It's just less, it's less dense and heavy, if you know what I'm talking about. This is delicious, you guys. They're so light and flaky. You would never know this is whole wheat bread. Perfect afternoon snack right here. All right. Let's work on some cookies. Enough fun here. Okay, I'm getting my mixer bowl cleaned up here so I can start on my sandwich bread. And I'm going to link this recipe for you down the description box with my other recipes. This one comes from, I believe it's called a Modern Homestead. And it's called No Knead Einkorn Sandwich Bread. I'm not sure why it's called No Knead because the mixer mixes it for a long time. So that's the kneading part to me. Maybe because you're not hand kneading it. When I first saw this recipe, and I've tried a lot of sandwich bread recipes with einkorn that were big flops. And when I first saw this recipe, I was like, there's no way this is going to work. It goes against everything I have ever learned about baking bread. And I've been baking bread since I was like 8, okay? Almost 40 years. But this came out to be like the best sandwich bread recipe I have ever made. So highly recommend this one. This is going to use the all-purpose einkorn flour, but we are going to start with some warm water and yeast. This is 1.5 cups of warm water, not too hot because you don't want to kill the yeast, using 2, this is still my half teaspoon measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, because I'm getting 2 teaspoons plus another 1/4 teaspoon. And this, I'm kind of doing it out of order from what she put in there, and that's okay. That's totally okay. I always proof my yeast. That's why I have these I've made a lot of yeast recipes this week, so I know that my yeast is good, but I still like it. She also calls for a tablespoon of honey. I put about 2. It's all good. And I always let my yeast sit here and bloom, which is when you know if it is active. It starts to foam up. That's what you're looking for. Meanwhile, in here, I'm going to put my flour, salt, and ginger, which is something she has discovered is actually an old-fashioned way to help things rise a little bit better other than just yeast. And it doesn't taste like ginger at all, but it's really good. Okay, so 3 1/3 cups of the all-purpose einkorn flour. Fluffing it a bit here. 1, 2, 3, and 1/3. Put this back over here for when we... Actually, I want to say you don't even have to need this one on the counter. So I don't know why I left the flour on the counter. Okay, so I'm going to put in a teaspoon of salt. I prefer to put the salt in with the flour instead of with the yeast. 1 teaspoon of salt. And ginger, 1/4 teaspoon. I'm just going to use my teaspoon measure and get like 1/4. That was probably closer to 1/3. It's not going to be a big deal, trust me. Okay, I'm going to get that. I'm going to start with the dough hook straight off. And just get the salt and ginger and flour mixed up together. That's good enough. Okay, and as you can see, my yeast is blooming very well. Okay, I am adding my very well bloomed yeast mixture to the flour mixture. We get that all out of there with a spatula, and then this kneads for 10 minutes. That is right. I said 10 minutes. I just leave it on low like this and just let it go. And I just set a timer for 10 minutes and you'll see at the end that it looks completely different. Okay, so what was a ball of dough now almost looks like batter, but just trust the process. This is how it works. I'm going to scrape this down and then cover it with saran wrap. Then it rises for 25 minutes.
While I'm getting these onto the cooling rack, I just wanted to make a note that if you start to bake the cookies and they're spreading out a little too much, put the rest of your dough in the fridge for about half an hour and then bake those after they have been refrigerated.
Okay, I have a buttered dish here and you're going to want to see this. What? That is unlike any bread dough I have ever seen. So I have one bread pan here and I'm going to get a spatula. I'm going to butter the spatula because this does tend to be a little bit sticky. You could use oil, of course. And this is a unique bread in that we're just going to kind of pour it into the bread pan. We don't have to punch it down. We don't have to knead it. We're just going to kind of pour it in. Spread it out a little bit. Kind of jiggle it because those little points will show up on the final product. It's not bad though. Okay. And then we're going to cover this. I don't have plastic wrap, so I'm going to use my press and seal. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it upside down. I don't want the sticky side on that. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to butter it. Actually, I'm going to spray it with oil. You could butter it. Okay. And that way nothing is going to make this plastic stick to the bread dough. And now it's going to do its second rise, which is 20 minutes, and then it will be ready to bake. So I'm going to preheat the oven to 375 while that is rising. All right, y'all. Sorry if it's gotten dark in here, but I've got a thunderstorm going on outside. 20 minutes later, this has risen and it's still stuck to my greased plastic. My oven is preheated to 375, and I'm just going to put this straight in. Okay, I'm going to start with 30 minutes and then start checking it. Her directions call for 35 to 40 minutes. My oven is propane, and I've calibrated it so I know that the temperature is not hotter, but I feel like it's hotter. It cooks things a little bit faster than my old oven used to. That was like natural gas. So I'm starting with 30 and I'll be checking it. It gets a beautiful golden brown, and soon we'll be looking at bread. You guys, look at that beautiful loaf. Golden brown and perfect. Whew. That is beautiful. It has the hollow thump. It's done. It's ready. I actually still have time, 5 minutes on my timer. So that means it took 25 minutes for me. Einkorn bread, you do want to leave. I'll take it out of here, but you want it to cool all the way before you cut into it. So about 2 hours. Okay, I let it cool like 5 minutes. And then we'll get it out of the pan. Okay, flip it back over, and then we'll let it finish cooling off before we cut into it. When I was researching einkorn bread, I did read a lot of places where people suggested that you cut it from the bottom, like flip it upside down and cut it from the bottom so that you don't squash it. I don't think that's at all necessary. I think you just use a serrated bread knife, just like angel food cake. You just don't push hard. You use the sawing motion and just a little bit of pressure, and it goes right through. It does not squish it at all. It is just fine. And that is some beautiful sandwich bread right there. Gorgeous. Look at that crumb. It is light, fluffy, delicious bread. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen today, guys. I hope that you enjoyed learning about einkorn and the things that I like to make with it. If you have a favorite recipe with einkorn flour, leave it for me in the comments. I would love to know what you like to make with it. For now, I'm going to snack on some bread, maybe make a sandwich, and I'll see you guys in the next video.